I declined to take care of my manipulative stepmother after enduring years of neglect. But then my brother disclosed the startling truth about her condition, and my dad finally recognized the reality. I'm Amanda, 27F, and for the past 5 years, I've been completely estranged from my stepmother, Diane, 52F. But my story started way before that. When I was just 2 years old, my biological mom, Karen, passed away from complications during childbirth. I don't have any memories of her, but my dad, Mark, 55M, always said she was the kindest person he ever knew. After Mom died, it was just Dad and me trying to get by. Dad worked long hours at his construction job, doing everything he could to provide, and our sweet elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, would watch me after school. It was a tough time, but honestly, those early years were some of my happiest memories. Things shifted when I was 6. Dad met Diane at a company picnic, and before I knew it, they were married within a year. Diane moved in with her son Tyler, who was 8 at the time, and I thought I was getting a new mom and big brother. I was excited. But it didn't take long for the reality to hit. From the get-go, Diane made it crystal clear that Tyler was her number one. She cooked his favorite meals, helped him with homework, and attended all his school events while I was often left to figure things out on my own. Dad seemed completely blind to the whole thing, or maybe he just didn't want to deal with it. I remember this one time when I was 9, I had a huge school project due and really needed some help. Diane was busy with Tyler's math homework, so I waited until she was done and asked if she could help me afterward. She snapped at me. "Can't you see I'm busy with Tyler? You're old enough to do it yourself." I stayed up late trying to finish it on my own and ended up getting a lousy C when I showed Dad my grade. He just told me I needed to try harder next time that hurt. As I got older, the favoritism became more obvious. When I was 12, I desperately wanted to join the school band and learn to play the flute. I begged for weeks, even promising to do extra chores and keep my grades up. They finally agreed, but only if I could keep straight A's for an entire semester. So I worked my butt off, nailed it, and got the grades. But when the time came, I found out they had already signed Tyler up for guitar lessons without any conditions, even though his grades were average. That was just how things went in our house. When I turned 16, all I wanted was a small party with my close friends at a local pizza place. Nothing crazy. But Diane convinced Dad it was too expensive and suggested we just have a family dinner at home instead. I was disappointed but went along with it. Then, 2 months later, for Tyler's 18th birthday, they threw him this massive party with half the school there, a DJ, the works. I was gutted. The most painful memory, though, was overhearing Diane on the phone with her sister. She was complaining about how difficult I was and how she wished she only had to deal with Tyler. She said, "I know I'm supposed to love her like my own, but it's just not the same. Tyler is my flesh and blood." I ran to my room and cried for hours. After that, something inside me just broke. I knew I wasn't part of her picture. The final straw came during my senior year of high school. I worked hard and got into my dream college, which was about 4 hours away. I was over the moon. But Diane immediately started pushing me to consider community college closer to home, arguing it would be cheaper and I could live with them. My dad, as usual, backed her up, but when I stood my ground and insisted on going to my chosen school, Diane dropped a bomb on me. They wouldn't be able to help me financially because they were saving up for Tyler's college fund. Tyler, who was 2 years older and had been bouncing between community colleges without a clear direction, was getting all the support while I was left to figure it out on my own. I felt completely betrayed. So I applied for scholarships, took out loans, and worked part-time to make it happen. During college, I barely heard from my family, an occasional text from Dad on my birthday or Christmas, but that was it. Diane and Tyler, radio silence. In my sophomore year, I met my boyfriend, Chris, 28M. He was the first person I opened up to about my family situation. When I told him how I'd been treated, he was shocked. He encouraged me to stand up for myself more. And with his support, I started setting boundaries with my family. I stopped coming home for every holiday, and I refused to babysit Tyler's dog whenever they went on vacation. After graduation, Chris and I moved 6 hours away for job opportunities, and for the first time, I felt like I was finally building a life on my terms. Chris and I had been talking about getting engaged, and I felt genuinely happy and secure until last week when I got a call from my dad. He told me that Diane had been diagnosed with a chronic illness and needed someone to help care for her. Tyler was too busy with his new job, his first real job at 29, so Dad asked if I could move back home to take care of her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything I'd been through, they expected me to drop everything and come running. I told Dad straight up that I couldn't do it. I reminded him how they'd treated me growing up, how they hadn't supported me through college. He got mad, called me selfish and ungrateful, and told me Diane had always treated me like her own daughter, which was complete BS. I stood my ground and refused. Now, I'm getting flooded with calls and texts from extended family members calling me heartless for abandoning Diane when she needs me most. Half of them don't even know the full story of how I was treated. My Aunt Carol, Dad's sister, left a particularly nasty voicemail saying my biological mom would be ashamed of me for turning my back on family. That one stung. I've always wondered what my mom would think of the person I've become. Chris has been amazing through all of this. He's fielding calls when I don't want to talk to anyone, but I can see how much it's stressing him out too. He hates seeing me upset. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. Maybe Diane did the best she could in a tough situation. But then I remember all those nights I cried myself to sleep feeling unwanted and unloved, and my resolve hardens. So, Reddit, am I wrong for refusing to help my stepmother after years of unfair treatment? Update 1. It's been a week since I posted, and wow, a lot has happened. First off, thank you all for your support and advice. It really helped me stay firm in my decision. The day after I posted, I got a call from my Aunt Lisa, 50F, my dad's youngest sister. She's always been more understanding than Aunt Carol, though she didn't know the full story either. She gently suggested that I reconsider helping Diane, saying her condition might be worse than I realized. I decided it was time to set the record straight. I spent nearly 2 hours on the phone with Lisa, laying it all out, every incident of favoritism, every moment of neglect. I told her about the college fund situation, the birthday parties, the time Diane forgot to pick me up from soccer practice and I waited 3 hours in the rain. I even told her about winning a statewide essay contest in high school. The prize was $500 and a trip to the state capitol to read my essay in front of the governor. I was so proud. But when I told Diane and Dad, their response was lukewarm at best. Diane even suggested I give the scholarship money to Tyler because he was struggling in college. When I finished, Lisa was quiet for a long time. Then, to my surprise, she apologized. She admitted she had no idea it was that bad and had always thought I was just a difficult teenager. She promised to talk to Dad and set him straight. And she did. The next day, Dad called me. His tone was completely different. He started by apologizing for not standing up for me more when I was younger, admitting he'd been afraid of rocking the boat with Diane. He even shared some things I hadn't known, like how after my mom died, he had been terrified of being a single parent. When he met Diane, he thought she'd be his lifeline. He confessed he often overlooked my needs because he was so grateful to her for stepping in. For a minute, I thought we were finally getting somewhere, but then he said, "Don't you think it's time to let bygones be bygones? Diane really needs help." I was stunned. Even after everything, he still expected me to drop everything and help her? I told him that while I appreciated the apology, it didn't erase years of hurt. I wasn't going to be Diane's caretaker, and I wasn't willing to give up the life I'd built for myself. He tried to guilt-trip me, saying, "What would your mother think if she knew you were refusing to help family that was the last straw?" I reminded him that my mom gave her life for me, and I doubted she'd want me sacrificing my happiness for people who never treated me as family. The fallout was swift. Tyler started texting me, calling me selfish and accusing me of abandoning the family. He brought up how he drove me to the hospital when I broke my arm at 14. Conveniently forgetting how he guilted me into doing his chores for a month afterward. I blocked him. Some cousins reached out, some supportive, others calling me ungrateful. Whatever, I decided to take a break from social media to avoid the drama. Chris has been a rock through all of this. He's been handling calls and making sure I'm okay. We've even talked about moving to put more distance between us and the situation. I'm standing my ground, but it's not easy. Update 2. So, things have taken a turn. I got a call from Tyler last week, and to my surprise, it wasn't to yell at me again. He started with an apology, admitting that he reacted out of guilt and frustration. Turns out he'd been carrying a lot of pressure from being the golden child. Diane had been comparing him to me for years, telling him he wasn't doing enough, and it had messed with his head. He admitted that he felt guilty about how Diane treated me, but didn't know how to stop it. Then he dropped the bomb. Diane had been exaggerating her illness. Sure, she had a condition, but it wasn't nearly as bad as she made it seem. She'd been using it to guilt Tyler into moving back home to take over the family business, something he had zero interest in doing. Tyler and I ended up talking for hours, really talking for the first time in years. He apologized for not standing up for me more when we were younger, and I realized that Diane had manipulated both of us in different ways. Tyler confronted our parents, and when he accused Diane of exaggerating her illness, she finally admitted it. Dad was furious. Diane stormed out and is now staying with her sister. As for Dad, he's a wreck. He's realizing just how much Diane manipulated him over the years, and it's hitting him hard. He asked Tyler if I'd be willing to talk to him, but I told Tyler I need time. I don't know if I'm ready to reopen that door yet. Update 3. After much thought, I agreed to meet with Dad. We met at a coffee shop, and it was an emotional conversation. He apologized, saying he failed me as a father and let his fear of losing his new family take precedence over me. He also told me he and Diane are now separated and considering divorce. He admitted that Diane had threatened to leave with Tyler if he ever sided with me, and that fear drove many of his decisions. While I appreciated the apology, I told him it didn't magically fix everything. We talked for hours, rehashing old wounds, but I felt like we made progress. He's filing for divorce, and Tyler is finally pursuing his passion for cooking, something he was too scared to admit before. Things are still awkward, but Dad and I are rebuilding our relationship. Tyler and I are actually getting closer too. It's strange but comforting. I don't know what the future holds for my family, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful.